Welcome to The Explainer, where today we are jumping straight into the layered mythology and the actual tangible historical footprint of the most famous, supposedly most beautiful woman in the ancient world. We're talking about a figure whose actions, whether she chose them or was forced into them, literally ignited a legendary 10-year world war. So let's unpack the story of Helen of Troy, exploring everything from her absolutely chaotic divine origins to the tantalizing Bronze Age realities that might have actually inspired her enduring myth. Was this the face that launched 1,000 ships and burnt the topless towers of Ilium? Man, that iconic line from Christopher Marlowe's 1604 play Dr. Faustus just perfectly captures the explosive cultural footprint of her legacy, doesn't it? It instantly establishes the massive, world-shattering stakes of the conflict she inspired. For centuries, artists and writers have used these exact words to convey the sheer, devastating power of her beauty. We're talking about a level of beauty that resulted in the complete and utter destruction of a powerful, walled city. Here is our roadmap for the explainer today. We're going to cover 1. The face that launched war. 2. Divine origins and early life. 3. The oath and elopement. 4. The siege of Troy. 5. The Egyptian phantom. And finally, 6. Cults and historical reality. Let's get right into it. Section 1. The face that launched war. An enduring legacy of beauty and destruction. So, for 27 centuries, this figure has been one of the most fiercely debated characters in the ancient world. She's this fascinating anchor point used by both Eastern and Western cultures to explore the ultimate conflict between duty and desire. But here's the thing you have to remember. Before she was ever associated with Troy, she was actually Helen of Sparta. The epic poets describe her as this gorgeous, feisty princess and the heir to a really lush, fertile Spartan kingdom on the Greek mainland. And what's absolutely crucial to understand here is that her beauty wasn't just, aesthetic. It was described by Homer as being like that of a goddess. It was a ferocious vitality, a terrifying, destabilizing power that ultimately spawned rage, suffering, and some really ugly deaths for those who encountered it. Moving on to Section 2, Divine Origins and Early Life, the chaotic beginnings of a demigod. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is how the ancient texts construct her incredibly bizarre birth. Long before the Trojan War, Helen's life was already steeped in some deeply contradictory mythological circumstances. Let's look at the two main differing traditions we have. On one side, the most familiar story, the one popularized by Euripides, claims she was hatched from an egg after Zeus visited the Spartan queen Leda in the form of a swan. But then, on the flip side, older archaic traditions from texts like the Cypria insist her mother was actually the goddess Nemesis. In that version, Nemesis transformed into various animals to flee Zeus, finally becoming a goose. Zeus, naturally, also became a goose, and their union produced the egg that eventually yielded Helen. But regardless of which version you look at, her origin is undeniably divine and, quite frankly, incredibly chaotic. And that chaos, it definitely didn't stop at birth. Her early life was marked by extreme danger long before the fateful arrival of Paris. According to ancient sources, when she was still just a young girl, some accounts say as young as 7 or 10, she was abducted by the Athenian hero Theseus, who basically decided he wanted a divine wife. He left her in the care of his mother while he went off to travel to the underworld. Well, this obviously sparked an invasion of Athens by Helen's formidable twin brothers, Castor and Pollux. They successfully rescued her and brought her back to Sparta, where she eventually reached marriageable age. It's like her whole life was just one abduction after another. Which brings us to Section 3, the oath and elopement, the political trap that bound all of Greece. Okay, let's look at the pivotal moment where choosing her husband almost triggered a massive riot. When it was time for Helen to marry, the situation in Sparta became highly volatile. Kings and princes from all over Greece gathered there, bringing these insanely rich gifts to seek her hand. Her earthly father, King Tyndareus, was absolutely terrified that picking just one suitor would spark a violent bloodbath among all the rejected kings. Enter Odysseus. He steps in and devises a clever solution known as the Oath of Tyndareus. Before any decision was made, every single suitor had to swear a solemn pact, which they sealed with a horse sacrifice, to militarily defend whichever man was chosen if Helen were ever stolen from him. Ultimately, Agamemnon's younger brother, Menelaus, was chosen because of his immense wealth. And just like that, Odysseus engineered a step-by-step political trap that legally bound every single Greek leader to defend this marriage. Section 4. The Siege of Troy. Conflicting accounts of a world war's catalyst. So after Menelaus and Helen ruled Sparta for at least 10 years, the Trojan prince Paris arrives on a diplomatic mission and everything changes. Now, when she eventually departed for Troy, the ancient accounts completely contradict each other regarding her agency. Did she jump or was she pushed? One side portrays her as a willing participant. Sources like Homer and the poet Sappho suggest Helen genuinely fell in love, willingly leaving her husband and her young daughter Hermione behind to chase passion. On the other hand, the opposing view presents her as a passive victim, violently abducted and forced onto Paris's ship against her will. This forced kidnapping narrative is actually the one that became heavily favored and depicted in later Renaissance art. But looking at it impartially, her true level of complicity remains one of mythology's absolute greatest debates. And during the bloody climax of the 10-year war, her actions are just maddeningly ambiguous. According to Homer's Odyssey, as the Greeks hid inside that famous wooden Trojan horse, Helen actually circled it and perfectly imitated the voices of the Greek soldiers' wives, actively trying to trick them into revealing themselves. But then, the Roman poet Virgil claims she feigned Bacchic rites so she could secretly signal the Greek army from a central tower with a torch. She's simultaneously acting as a treacherous traitor to the Greeks and a regretful, self-loathing captive of the Trojans. She faced immense hatred from the Trojan people, finding kindness really only from King Priam and his son Hector. Ultimately, after the city fell and was utterly destroyed, she miraculously reconciled with Menelaus. Some sources even say it happened because she bared her chest, causing him to literally drop his sword in awe.
Section 5. The Egyptian Phantom. An alternate history where she never reached Troy. Now, let's dive into an incredible twist recorded by several ancient historians. What if the Greeks destroyed Troy over a complete illusion? It's known as the Egyptian Phantom theory. While Homer insists the real flesh-and-blood Helen was in Troy, writers like Euripides and the historian Herodotus argued a completely different reality. Herodotus claimed he actually interviewed priests in Memphis, Egypt, who told him Paris's ship was blown off course. According to them, the Egyptian king Proteus was so disgusted by Paris's actions that he kept the real Helen safe in Egypt. Meanwhile, the gods fashioned a cloud phantom, an eidolon, in her exact physical likeness and sent that to Troy. Think about that for a second. If this tradition is true, it means the Greeks and Trojans spent a decade slaughtering each other over a literal cloud phantom, while the real Helen was just waiting safely in Memphis the whole time. Wild, right?
Section 6. Cults and Historical Reality. From Mythology to Archaeological Fact. So peeling back all this incredible poetry reveals a very tangible, real-world footprint. Far from being just a literary character, Helen was actually worshipped by ancient people as a powerful deity. In Sparta, she had a specific shrine at Therapne, which was originally dedicated solely to her before Menelaus was added much later. Furthermore, on the island of Rhodes, she was revered as Helen of the Trees, or Helene Dendritis. Scholars note that this points to her being an ancient vegetation and fertility goddess. It suggests that the mythological woman who caused the Trojan War may have originally evolved from deeply rooted pre-Greek religious cult practices. And this is where it gets even more fascinating. Thrilling modern archaeological excavations reveal that Homer's world was actually rooted in reality. The Greeks really did besiege Troy around 1200 BC. Troy was a highly contested, incredibly wealthy hub of international trade and diplomacy. Even the really specific artifacts Homer describes, like golden spindles and boar's tusk helmets, have actually been unearthed by archaeologists. More importantly, historical records show that in this Bronze Age era, high-ranking female aristocrats actually had the standing, the agency, and the geopolitical power to genuinely spark threats of war between states. So Helen likely represents a composite of actual, high-status Bronze Age women, whose alliances and infidelities genuinely threatened empires. As we look back on 27 centuries of continuous fascination, we have to ask ourselves, was the face that launched 1,000 ships a pure poetic invention? Was it the echoing memory of a divine sun goddess, or a reflection of a very real, history-altering Bronze Age queen? The beauty of exploring this is that we have the evidence, but the final judgment is really up to you. Thank you for joining me on this deep dive, and keep questioning the history behind the myth.